Welcome to the T-Squared Dad's Brown Bag Podcast. Here's your hosts, Kyle Baker and Dieter Burrell. Welcome back to the Brown Bag Podcast. It's Dieter and Kyle here. Today we're going to be talking about a little bit of a difficult subject that people come in contact with in the business world, and that's giving feedback and receiving feedback. A lot of people are very fearful of this and are very hesitant to give feedback and also don't necessarily know how to react when receiving good feedback. So today, Dieter and I will be talking about some strategies, some ways to, really combat that fear that you have about giving feedback to people that you care about and reasons why giving feedback are really important. So Dieter, talking about feedback, have you, let's go back a long way. Let's talk about whenever you were a kid or things like that. And, how did you get feedback as a kid? Did you get positive feedback? Did you only get negative feedback? What do you think about that?
I think that when depending on who your parents are, I think everybody has a different relationship. I think parents tend to raise their kids the way they were raised.
Right.
Sometimes they change their style because they realize that they didn't like something that their parents did to them, and sometimes they get caught doing it even though they don't realize it subconsciously. But I do want to say something before we continue. Great article, or I guess great post from Kristen Hadid on this particular topic. It's critical, I think, that we learn how to do a 360 feedback.
Yeah, it's kind of a 360 feedback. She kind of references that it's a little bit different than a 360 review, but we can talk about that. But yeah, we got this blog post from Kristen, and it really sparked an interest in it for us, and so we wanted to share that with you guys.
Yeah, so going back, growing up, I don't think, and I hate for somebody to feel a little bit bad about it, but sometimes we don't have good experiences growing up when we get criticized for doing something wrong. Instead of it being this, you did a great job and we can probably improve on some of this stuff that you've done, the tendency is you did it wrong.
Right.
So you're kind of left there holding the bag going, okay, so how do I do it right? Or should I even, nobody wants to get a feedback in response. Well, you tend to have a really bad way of kind of, analyzing what people do wrong, but yet you're the first one to do all kinds of different things, all kinds of things that are wrong, but everybody's too afraid to respond to you because they're afraid of the counter lash that comes from that.
And I think that that's one of the big things, if I think back to when I was a kid, a lot of the criticism that I got was negative criticism.
Right.
But there are times when, I got a, attaboy, way to go kind of deal. And so my relationship with feedback is a little bit tried, but I've found a way coming through business and going through school and things like that. In school you get a lot of feedback. In architecture school, they kind of tear your model apart. They ask you why in the world would you ever do something like that, and really kind of are very harsh. But then towards the end you start getting some of these very positive feedback pieces about how you're doing things, and that's when I really started to grasp that idea of how important positive feedback is, and not just telling someone something that they're doing wrong, but also telling people when they're doing something right. And so that was one of the pieces in this article that I found really interesting, was having a feedback loop with people in your firm or people in your business and trying to really understand why they like to have feedback, maybe why they're standoffish to people giving them feedback, and really thinking back down to the core of what the root problem is with that. And I think a lot of people, whenever you come out of that, a lot of people are just scared. They either, one, don't want to give negative feedback to someone because they don't want to hurt their feelings, or they don't want to give negative feedback because they don't want to hear the negative things about themselves.
Right.
And so in this article, one of the things that they talked about were trying to identify like 1 to 2 personal behaviors that you feel like you're doing very well, something that you're adding value to your company, something that you're adding value to the other people in your company, and then also trying to think about things that you might need to consider as far as things you could be doing better.
Right.
Giving 1 to 2, personal behavior traits that are helping, and then also giving 1 to 2 personal behavior traits that you need to work on, or that you need to consider more often as a negative to the people that are around you.
But how would you approach it though? It's like to tell someone that their behavior, they excel at this particular behavior, and how do you tell them it's like, well, there's other behavior that you're lacking or that you could improve, or do you use somebody else as an example?
Yeah, and that's one of the big things that kind of shifts all the time in these types of conversations. A big one a few years back was what we kind of referred to as like the shit sandwich. You say something really nice, then you say what you really need to be saying about a critical piece of what they're doing that you don't really like, and then you end it off with something nice. So it's like 2 pieces of bread and just a whole bunch of crap in the middle. And so you feel like you're lessening the blow to that person by building them up, bringing them down, and trying to build them back up again. But a lot of people see right through that. And I think the biggest thing is that you have to remember that anytime you're giving feedback to somebody, you're kind of being vulnerable to them, right? You're being vulnerable in the way that you're presenting this information. Most people know that whenever somebody brings positive or negative feedback to you, that more than likely they didn't really want to have this conversation. But setting aside the time, trying to figure that out, and anytime that you're giving that feedback, it's building trust. That was the thing that Kristen talked about in here as well, is giving feedback helps to build trust amongst people. And trust, especially in our field, is very, very important.
I saw a post. You just reminded me of something because it triggered my thought. It says, great leaders lead by example. And just by saying that makes you think, if I had to have a relationship with people that I have to lead, it's because sometimes you don't become a leader because people look up to you. You become a leader because you're in a position of power, by having a company or by having you're having to manage multiple clients. You're sort of given that position that people have to support you. And then sometimes your position flips. In some cases, you're the supporter. In some business models, you have that relationship where at times you can be the leader in that group, and then somebody else can be the supporting member. Mm-hmm. But I think what I'm going with it is, if you as a individual ask for feedback as a leader, you're asking for feedback constantly. Hey guys, I need to know where I can improve on things, because I want to be there for you guys, and I want to be the hands that lift you up. So if I'm not there to do this for you guys, then I can't improve, and I can't help you improve. And this is sort of where it falls back to allowing people to drop their guard and say, oh my God, I never realized how much Kyle is always looking to improve, because he's always asking for my feedback. Yeah,
that leading with empathy, that's what I would kind of characterize that as, if I had to sum it up in one word, is leading through empathy, really caring about the people that you're working with, getting through things together. And this feedback that we're talking about, it has everything to do with that, as far as working together to meet a common goal, to get better as a team, to get better as a business. And the other way that I think that was very interesting about the way that, we can set these meetings up is, you go into the meeting with something you can work on, something that you bring to the table, and then you start, getting into the same groove with everybody else. What can Dieter do better? What does Dieter already do that's great? And so whenever you come to that meeting, the first thing you do is you kind of break down that barrier by saying how you feel about yourself, right? If I've kind of already criticized myself, it makes it a lot easier for other people to feel open about telling me some other things that I can work on. So if you're out there and you're having, some feedback loop issues, try that. Try coming to the table with things that you feel you're doing good, and also things that you feel like you need to work on or consider doing better. And that will help to allow the other people that are giving you feedback feel comfortable criticizing you in a positive way.
I think you triggered something, because it's a domino effect, and I think if anybody's listening to think about this, is I'm gonna associate it with random acts of encouragement. Instead of random acts of criticizing, you create an environment where you promote good behavior by, telling somebody congratulations, or telling somebody, say, hey, today, I wanted to kind of bring up the topic of John having done this extra effort with this one client. He calls me, the client calls me, and there really isn't a need for a client to call somebody. If you think that somebody that you work with did something fantastic, bring it up to everybody's attention. Tell the owner, tell the manager, tell people that he did something, because we're in an environment constantly being criticized by underperformance, that the small acts of someone doing something above and beyond what they normally would have done, even if it's just, hey, great penmanship. I mean, something as easy. Hey, you caught all the red lines. Hey, you had a conversation. You reached out to the contractor. You reached out to the mechanical engineer. You sent those drawings, an hour before they were due, or you read my mind. You needed to send those notes to that consultant so that he can double check the meeting notes that we had for that. Again, it goes back to, it shows initiative, and it shows that you're to your boss that you care enough to make sure that the work's getting done and that you're conveying the information. And it could be anything. And I think that people just tend to forget to open their mouths to say something positive to somebody. All they ever do is just criticize and bring people down and just, oh, look at the way that guy's driving.
Yeah.
Oh, man, I'm sick and tired of these damn drivers. You guys can kind of sympathize with me. You can actually kind of associate with me, kind of sitting there. It's like when you're driving, if your mind is always in the gutter, guess what happens when you get to the office?
Yeah.
Your mind is in the gutter.
Absolutely.
Instead of kind of surrounding yourself with the idea of saying, hey, tell me something positive that happened today. Well, I can't tell you a darn thing what happened today. It's like, what do you mean? Something positive must have happened today. Think about it. Take 2 seconds. Ask your wife when you get home, hey, sweetheart, tell me something positive that happened. And if she sits there for more than 30 seconds, then you jump in and say, hey, guess what? I saw this in the news, or I saw, somebody got greeted and, it made somebody else happy.
Yeah. And bringing your wife into it struck a thing for me is these feedback pieces and these conversations that are being had that you're thinking about at your office, you really should also bring those types of things home, right? Like with your kids, with your wife, like have those conversations with them. I don't have as big a problem with it at the office. I find myself giving good criticism, but also giving, compliments on things that are being done well. But I struggle with that more at my house. Sometimes I have a really hard time. Like I'm more criticizing at the house. We're making dinner and I'm like, oh, that's not how you cut up an onion. This is how you do it.
Right.
And that doesn't come across very well. Yeah. So this doesn't just pertain to your office, to your business. It pertains to your whole life in general, as far as giving feedback and giving, positive criticism, giving compliments, but also being able to have those hard conversations when there's something that needs to change.
Yeah.
So as far as the feedback or anything like that, have you ever came across anybody that gave you really good feedback?
I'm going to keep this one in my back pocket for the rest of my life. I heard this, it was a review. I had to sit down with these folks. I won't say the name of the company, but if you are listening out there, you probably know who you are. I was told, and it kind of hit me, I don't understand what you mean, but I'm kind of taking the long road over here, telling the story. And he says, Dieter, there's something about you. You take a hold of something and you handle that big gorilla on your own. And I kind of said, what does that mean? What does that mean? I take on and handle that gorilla on my own. And what he meant to say was that you're not afraid to take on something that's challenging.
Yeah, that's even bigger than you are.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he said that he started the whole review with saying that, and then it almost seemed like everything else after that meant nothing.
Yeah.
Like it just was insignificant. Like, okay, you can improve on talking on the phone. You can improve, greeting people. But all of a sudden, it's like all that other stuff that kind of seemed trivial. And because some people can make those things. Oh my God, can you imagine he criticized me because I kind of looked the wrong way? So we'll kind of, do something different. It's like, and you're kind of, you make things bigger than they are when they really aren't.
Yeah.
People are criticizing you, and all of a sudden it's like when you tell people these huge monumental things that they think of. It's like, Kyle does such a great job. He's always engaged in the office. He's always helping others. But does Kyle ever hear that? Hey, you know what? I'm glad that you're here with us.
Right.
That's all you need, a tap in the shoulder and say, I'm glad that you're here with us.
Yeah, and that's something to remember. Like, don't feel like you have to save up all of these things for whenever you get into the conference room and sit down and we're going to have our feedback loop this week or this year or whatever. Right. You don't have to do that. You can give those things every day. You can have a feedback loop with people on a day-to-day basis. Right. But whenever you do go and you sit down, trying to follow some of these things that we're talking about, drop your guard. A lot of people, talk about you putting your armor on whenever you go into these feedback type situations. You armor up and you're just ready to defend and you don't want to really take anything in. Drop your armor, allow yourself to give yourself feedback, give yourself criticism, and that will allow other people to really help you grow as a person. And by doing that, you're going to build trust along with that in your team. And so focus on that, and we will talk to you guys next time. But before we go, as always, the joke of the day. Why was the chicken doing jumping jacks? Because she wanted scrambled eggs. Thanks for listening to the T-Squared Dad's Brown Bag Podcast. Please subscribe on your favorite platform, and we will talk to you next time.